What is going on, guys? JT43 here. In this video, we're going to be going over, are wheel spacers actually dangerous? If you're anything like me, you're doing a lot of research trying to find if wheel spacers are actually safe or not. You're getting a bunch of mixed match answers and you can't find a definitive answer. So you're kind of like stressing out a little bit. You just bought some wheels, maybe they don't fit exactly the way you want to, fitment wise. Maybe some fender to lip action isn't really, doing its thing. So you're trying to use a wheel spacer instead of buying new wheels. I could just return them. Well, if you're anything like me, you're kind of a procrastinator and you kind of just let the wheels sit for a little bit because you're trying to find the right time to put them on. We've all been there, we've all done that, that's fine. I can't return them anymore, so we got to make them work. I was in that exact same position last year. This video will pretty much answer your question, but at first I think it's important to understand a couple different things about wheel spacers, is what they're used for, what exactly they are, and how to properly use them. So I'll go over all those in this video, and also the different types of wheel spacers and what you should use and what you shouldn't use. So I think first, we're going to talk about what exactly a wheel spacer is. Now, I'm sure a lot of us know what wheel spacers are, but for those that don't, it's pretty much a piece of metal that bolts onto your, it either bolts or it sits up against your rotor, and it creates space between the rotor and the wheel. Now, obviously, normally a wheel would just bolt right up to the rotor, causing it to sink in more, but a spacer, depending on your size, can space out the wheel a lot or just a little bit, depending on what you need. In my example here, I have a bolt-on spacer with its own studs. So I'm gonna get into all the different kinds of wheel spacers and ones that you should use and shouldn't use a little bit later. But I guess we can talk about what wheel spacers are used for. So there's a couple different things that wheel spacers are used for. People say the most common is big brake kits, to clear big brake kits, because when you put a big brake kit on caliper kit, the caliper sometimes sticks out more and it can scrape the wheel or something like that, so people use wheel spacers to space their wheel out so it doesn't hit the caliper. I don't know how many people are actually doing big brake kits. I mean, I know it's popular more in the older cars, because the older cars, their calipers are way different than the new calipers that you can get for it. But a lot of these newer calipers, I mean, they're not that different in size than the OEM ones. They might just be a little bit longer, but width-wise is pretty much the same. But that is one of the reasons, is for a big brake kit. Majority of reason of why people use wheel spacers is to get good fitment. Without my spacer, right, I have these wheels over here, and when I put those wheels on, it sinks in so bad. Like the wheel to fender, the wheel's probably sitting like in here and the fender is all the way out here. So this bit of gap right here is just, that's no good for me. You want to have good fitment because it makes your car look better and it makes your car look more aggressive, in my personal opinion. So a lot of people will buy, wheels that they like, and it could be older wheels. People that buy older wheels have this problem all the time, because you can't make the size anymore unless you turn it into a 3-piece, and then you can make a custom lip and a custom bore and all that stuff. But if you're buying like an early 2000s chrome piece, like a lot of stance kids do this because they have to work with what they got. So a lot of the times the wheel is too small, like, not like, I don't mean 18-inch, 17-inch, 16-inch, I mean like small in width. So they have to use spacers to space it out so that they can get good fender to lip. Like if we come over here to my Lexus, like that is perfect fender to lip. Now if I go out a little bit, you can see the tire, but I'm like on an angle here. If I go directly where the fender ends here, my tire is right there. That is like perfect fender to lip fitment. In this case, with my Scion, that wasn't the case, and I put these new wheels on and they sunk in a lot, so I needed to use a wheel spacer to poke it out. Fender to lip is definitely one of the biggest reasons why people run spacers, but another reason that people forget is like when they want to utilize the stock wheels. Not every car's stock wheels look bad, and sometimes people want to have good fender to wheel fitment with stock wheels. Usually the stock wheel sits in, right? That's kind of like every single car. I don't think there's a car that comes with factory that's like fender to lip like that. So people will use spacers to kind of just poke out their stock wheel to get more aggressive fender to lip. It happens all the time. Now that we talked about the different things that spacers are used for, let's kind of talk about the different types of spacers. So like I said, what I have here is a spacer with its own lug threads. So pretty much what that means, right, is I have my spacer here. The spacer bolts onto my factory lug studs, right? So these right here are my factory lug studs. And then the spacer itself has its own lug studs. The reason why I recommend this is so that you don't have to run extended studs. With this case, obviously with my spacer being bolted onto my factory studs, I can just put my wheel on these as if it's normal, as if there's no issue. But there's a couple things that we have to look out here. So this is not a universal spacer, okay? This was made for my car. It's the same specs as my car. The hub bore right here is the factory spec of my car. The lug stud threads are a little bit longer, but that's exactly what I wanted. It's just the way that it came. It could have been factory size and it would have been okay too, but they're a tiny bit longer to fit wider wheels, so that's good too. And the thread size. So this is a lug nut that my factory lugs with the car can screw onto these. So you want to keep everything as factory as possible if you're going to go with the lug studs. So of course you want to keep your hub bore the stock size. You don't want to get a different size unless you can find a hub bore that fits the aftermarket wheel you want, but I have a solution to that and I'll get into that a little bit later. So you want the hub bore to match your factory spec and you want your lug stud to match your factory spec as if it's normal. That's probably the best way to run a spacer. But with that being said, there's another traditional way to run spacers, which is a spacer with no lug studs and you run extended wheel studs. So extended wheel studs, right? I'll show you in a second. So if we come back here to the junk pile, these are my old hubs off of my car, right? Pretty much what an extended lug stud does is you have your factory studs here, right? So you can see how kind of small this is. Like if I were to slip my spacer onto these and then try to bolt my wheel on, the spacer, let's just say it's the size of my finger here, right? So the spacer would sit like that on the stud. Look how much thread I have left to use for the wheel. I probably couldn't bolt the wheel onto the stud because there's not enough threads left, right? What they make is something called an extended stud. Pretty much what it is you would hammer your factory studs out like this, right? You'd hammer all these out and you would hammer in, or not hammer in, but you would pretty much install longer studs and they would probably stretch out to here, so that you can safely fit the spacer on and your wheel on. That would be another way to run a traditional spacer, but it ultimately depends on what kind of size you're gonna be running. So mine's a 20 mil, and even with 20 mil, I have to run its own lug studs. With an extended wheel stud, you can go as wide as you want, as long as a manufacturer makes a stud that's that long. Well, if you want to run like, I don't know, a 90 mil spacer, like something this big, yeah, you're gonna need a custom extended stud. But the dangerous part about that is the longer you are, the more stress it puts on the lug studs and it puts on your hub. It takes time to really wear out your hubs. It just does it a little bit quicker than as if it was stock. But if you're running a huge spacer, like if you're installing a wide body, right, like a lot of wide body people do this, you can obviously buy a wheel that's that wide, but some people go even wider and they still need to buy that wide ass wheel and they need to run spacers. If you're doing something like running skinny tires like this and you're running a wide body and you're running like a 60 mil spacer with lug studs, that's where it kind of gets sketch, because you know you have to have a really strong lug stud. Mind you, the longer it is, the easier it can be weakened, if that makes sense. Where the shorter it is, the kind of harder it is to snap off, because it's, you know, it's stronger that way. But if it's longer, it kind of, you know what I mean? So it's doable, but I would not drive crazy at all with something that's long. Obviously, that's a more taboo case because a lot of people are just running like maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 35 millimeter spacer. I mean, 20 to 25 should be the maximum that you need for just a regular car. And then probably the most dangerous option would be a universal spacer, a spacer that fits any kind of car. That's obviously a no-go in my book, because not only you have to make sure that the lug pattern is correct, you have to make sure that the hub bore size is correct. And if it's a slide-on spacer, you can get away with it a little bit more. But if it's a spacer with its own lug studs, you have to make sure that it fits your lug pattern, and you have to make sure that the wheel that you bought fits this lug stud. When you start doing universal, that's where things kind of get sketchy. A lot of them are not hub-centric, which is very important. You definitely want to be hub-centric. But what that does is, like, it's really hard to line up, because when you set the spacer on, it's going to fall down to one side. okay? Because it can't be held on by anything because it's a universal one. It can fit multiple bolt patterns and it can fit multiple hubs. So it's probably gonna be big as hell in the middle. So when you try to slide that on here and you go to grab your wheel, that shit's gonna slide down to the bottom. Now, granted, yes, technically it's gonna be sandwiched between the rotor and your wheel, so it can't physically go anywhere. But with the metal being drooped down, right, with it hanging not in the center, that's gonna cause a crazy vibration because it's not sitting in the center. It's drooping down a little bit because you went to go pick up your wheel. Now you can try and like hold it to the middle and then put your wheel on. It's gonna be hard. You can try to do that and then, you know, still hold it and sandwich it so that it's sandwiched in the middle, but it's never gonna be perfect. You're always gonna have a vibration like that because think about it. When it's centered and it turns, it's gonna be perfect. If it's drooping a little bit and it turns, it's gonna create like an oval and it's just gonna make it unbearable. Another thing that's pretty self-explanatory is making sure that you're using a reputable spacer. Don't buy these cheap aluminum spacers, okay? Especially if they have lugs in them. They have lug studs in them, because I've seen people, you know, drive a little bit hard on them and the lug studs break right off or they unwind themselves. Unwind themselves meaning like they're ripping through the spacer because of the heat and it's warping. That's another thing, warping too with these cheap spacers. You know, they're not a good metal, so they get hot and they start shifting and they start warping a little bit. It sounds ridiculous, but I've seen all of this at the same time, you know, because in my area a lot of kids like to do sketchy shit with their cars. So, you know, I've kind of seen it all when it comes to this. So just don't use cheap material. Try to buy a reputable brand. I got these wheel spacers on ksp.com. I don't know if they'll fit your car, but you know, if you're a Toyota guy, these fit many Toyotas, many Toyotas. Once again, this is a 20 mil spacer. That's all they have. They don't have a 25 or, you know, 30. They only have 20. But in my honest opinion, if you're gonna daily drive it, 20 is all you need. Now that we know about the different types of spacers and what not to do and what to do, let's talk about installing the spacer correctly. Let's say that you did everything correctly, okay? You bought a reputable spacer. It's got good material. It's got strong lug nut studs. Let's just say you got one with a lug nut stud. You're probably gonna end up getting one with a lug nut stud anyway. Nobody really runs extended studs. Like, you know, it's kind of a lot of work. Let's just say that you did everything right, but you're still having issues because you didn't do it correctly. That's where you're getting things wrong. So there's a couple things that I want to point out here, okay? So first, let's talk about how to actually install it. Now, I have a TC. This is a 2011 TC. I made a video on me installing it, right? So the best way to install it is to just torque it correctly, okay? So what I mean by that is you're gonna slide the spacer on, okay? Now it's gonna come with like trailer nuts. That's fine. People use Loctite. Don't go crazy with it, but you can hit it with a dab of Loctite so that you know the spacer isn't gonna come off. Now, usually, now it should come with instructions if it's a reputable spacer. A lot of the time, you just have to torque them to your factory spec, okay? A majority of the time. If you have instructions and it says to do otherwise, obviously do what the instructions are saying. But most of the time, you're just gonna have to torque it to your factory spec and it should be okay. That's what I did. This is a 75 torque. I torque it to 80, and I haven't had any issues with that. Okay, I see too many people, they're gunning the shit out of this thing, and they're wondering why it's like giving a wobble or it's like feeling like a wheel's flying off because you over tighten the fuck out of this thing. It's not meant for that. Torque it to spec, okay? Make sure that you're hub centric so that your wheel could fit on perfectly, okay? And I'll show you what to do if you get a hub centric spacer and your wheel's not fitting correctly, okay? I have a fix for that. I'll show you. But and then yes, you can use a little bit of Loctite. What I see people not do is torque them, or you know, they're not tightening them enough either. You got to make sure that you're tightening your wheel spacer. This now is what's connecting your wheel to the car. So if your wheel is bolted onto the spacer, but the spacer isn't securely bolted onto the car, what the fuck are we doing here? This is what's holding your wheel to the car. So you have to make sure that it's set correctly. Now, in terms of seizing, okay, you can look at mine. Mine's a little bit worn. It's definitely seen its day, right? Because I drive pretty hard with this car, okay, and I haven't had any issues. But what I like to do is I like to just put a little bit of grease around, not on the lug studs. Don't get it on the lug studs. But I like to put a little bit of grease around just so that, you know, my wheel doesn't seize to the spacer or my spacer doesn't seize to my rotor. I just did rear brakes last video and they popped right off, no issue, and that was with just a little bit of grease. So you can put a little bit of grease on the back side to the rotor, and then you could put a little bit of grease on the surface here for the wheel. That's fine. So let's say a scenario. So you just got this spacer hub centric to the same spec as your car, and you just bought aftermarket wheels and it's not fitting on there correctly. I'll show you exactly what to do. So this wheel right here, okay, this is a FC04. It's out of Canada. Everyone says that it's a rep. It's not a rep, bro. Please stop it. Stop calling my shit a rep, please. So I believe my factory, yeah, so it's 60.1. So it's a 60.1 hub bore. You can see right here, 61, okay? So that's my hub bore size. This wheel is definitely not that. So if I put this wheel on there, it'll sink right to the bottom. I'll show you what I mean. So if you take a look here, you can see the middle of my hub. Look at all this space on the hub. That's because a lot of aftermarket wheels will make it so that any car can fit them, okay? And you might be thinking, lug-centric. I really don't trust lug-centric, to be completely honest with you. You're still gonna have a vibration, and I think the car, like, not I think, but I'm very confident in having your car sitting on the hub, okay? Because God forbid you hit a crazy pothole, a lug stud snaps or whatever, I don't know. But if your car is bolted onto the studs and it's sitting on the hub, you really shouldn't have any issues because it has a platform to sit on. It's not just sitting on studs. So what you would do is you would take the wheel off, right? And it should say a size on the back. Okay, somewhere it should say a size. But what you're gonna do then, you're gonna get a hub-centric ring, okay? I made videos on this when I installed the wheels for the Lexus. I highly recommend hub-centric rings, okay? Especially for spacers. So you're just gonna slide the ring onto there and you can see it's a perfect fit. There is no play. There is no play in this ring at all, okay? You can see when I put it into my wheel, you have to push it in because it's tight, which is what you want. You want it to be tight. You don't want it to be loose. So now, when you put this wheel onto the spacer, it's sitting on the hub bore, or it's sitting on the bore here. And it's a pretty thick bore. So it's not, you know, the bores on the actual hub of the car, they're like a little tiny lip, but this is a pretty decent sized lip. So you're safer that way. So now let's talk about two more things before I wrap this video up. Hard driving with spacers and torquing the wheel to the spacer. We'll start with torquing the wheel to the spacer. It's gonna be the same principle. You're just gonna torque the wheel to the factory spec of the car. So my factory spec is 75. I'm just gonna torque 75 to the spacer lug studs. It's that simple. Mind you, if your spacer came with special instructions, follow those instructions. But usually, it will be the factory spec of your car. Now let's talk about hard driving. So like I said, my car is a 2011 Scion TC. I put a lot of track orientated mods on it. It has full suspension. It has some front strut bar, really stiff suspension. I already said that. I just put some new tires on it. It's not a track car. I just like going to the toe gaze and just having fun and stuff. So I do drive this car pretty heavy around corners. And like I said, if you have everything tightened correctly and you know that you're being safe with everything, you have a hub-centric spacer. You have strong studs on your spacer. You know the metal of your spacer is a reputable brand and it's not some Chinese shit from like Amazon or eBay. And you know that if you have a aftermarket wheel that has a huge hub bore size, that you're running a hub-centric ring so that your wheel can fit properly onto the spacer and you're torquing it correctly, you should have no issues. I've had these spacers on this car for about a year and a half now, and I haven't had any issues. No issues at all. No snapping, no warping, none of that. It's just, you just got to do it correctly. So to answer the video's question, are wheel spacers dangerous? No, they're not. You just have to do it the right way. And if you do it the right way and you do it the safe way, you're not going to have any issues. that's gonna wrap it up for this video. If you did enjoy this video, or if this helped you out in any way, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later.